Is Madison Brookshire. I'm a programmer with Los Angeles Filmforum, and I'm just really grateful to all the artists who have been able to join us tonight, and especially their willingness to share their work with us. I'd also like to thank Travis Wilkerson for his role in helping shape tonight's program, but also for bringing it to us at Los Angeles Film Forum to be able to share it with our community. And I'd also like to thank all of you for attending. It has been a long, strange, awful, wonderful week at various moments. And one of the few things that's buoyed my spirit during some of its stormier moments was actually working on this program and being able to revisit these beautiful and in many ways redemptive films. In his theses on the philosophy of history, Walter Benjamin writes, quote, "Our image of happiness is indissolubly bound up with the image of redemption." And I believe art has this redemptive power. Art, and specifically art that makes use of the archive, as so many of the films that we'll see tonight do, has the ability to create consciousness. And tonight's program shows me the relationship between oppression and repression, and that art, specifically experimental film, can be a way to quote unquote unrepress or recall trauma and ultimately heal. Walter Benjamin went on to write in that same essay, "There's a secret agreement between past generations and the present one, and that our coming was expected on Earth." So he says the past predicts the present and gives each generation the power to redeem the past. And I think that certainly applies to the body of films that we'll be seeing tonight. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Jesse Lerner, before the artists introduce some of their films for tonight's program. Jesse?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us. I think last month, a little more than a month ago, was the 52nd anniversary of the October 2nd massacre at Flatlolco, which is a point of departure for a number of these films. And I imagine, I don't know how much all of you know about that particular historical moment. Some of you may know a lot, and others less. But in 10 days before the 1968 Olympics opened in Mexico City, as was going on in Paris and Tokyo and Chicago and a lot of different cities around the world, the student movement that began at the university with this very sort of restricted set of demands, freedom for political prisoners, and slight changes in law of sedition that was used as a kind of carte blanche to arrest and imprison silence political dissenters, had escalated to the point where they were starting to make contacts with union groups and called for a giant meeting at the Flatlolco Plaza de las Tres Culturas, this plaza where you have a colonial church and pre-Columbian ruins and modernist housing development all in the same public space. And it was there that the government forces opened fire on the demonstrators and killed we don't know how many people. But that's kind of in the background of a number of these films, as is some of the current violence and femicides in Mexico. And the 9 shorts by 12 filmmakers, I think 8 of them are here with us tonight, all emerged from these 2 workshops that Travis Wilkerson gave in 2018 and 2019 at the UNAM as part of the Cátedra Bergman in conjunction with the Docs MX Film Festival. And they all use, or almost all of them use archival material, including a lot of stuff from the Filmoteca de la UNAM. So I know a few of you want to say a couple words about your particular film before the screening, before we run the whole program of 9 films. And if I'm not mistaken, we have with us Arian Sánchez, Covisa, Macarena Hernandez, Facundo Torrieri, Aurora Fragoso, Gerardo Porras Garza, Erik Mares, Iliana Pichardo, and Andrea Rodea. But maybe I left someone out, or is that everybody? all the filmmakers rather. So who wants to say something about their particular film or about the program, or about maybe more generally Travis Wilkerson's workshops?
Boy.
Adelante.
Should I go? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Iliana. This is Facundo. We are filmmakers of The Appearances, and just wanted to thank the LA Film Forum. It's an honor to be here in such a special venue for experimental film and independent film. And about our short film, as Jesse said, it was done in the context of the 50th anniversary of the 1968 student massacre. And well, the powerful thing was the experience with Travis' workshop, and all the exercise we did in the technique he showed us in destroying the film. So the films you will see are the result of that workshop and all the inspiring materials and films he showed us. No.
I wish your response in English, but I try in Spanish.
Yo puedo
Sí, creo que el punto más importante de esta experiencia fue la práctica experimental en sí, la idea de una práctica experimental en la universidad. Me parece que es muy fuerte y generó un espíritu de grupo donde todas las piezas de algún modo se comunican y son parte de un mismo conjunto, ¿no?
The most important part of this experience was the introduction to this experimental practice, and all the works kind of come together as part of this experience.
Y la presencia, como dijo Iliana, de Travis Wilkerson también, o sea, realmente el material que él mostró fue muy inspirador y realmente emocionante para todos, creo, y nada, eso creo que marcó también un poco la construcción de estas piezas.
The material that he shared with us was really inspirational and really informs the work that we created and this experience.
Thank you.
Gracias.
¿Hay alguien más que quiere decir algunas palabras antes de la proyección?
Yeah, can you hear me, guys? Yeah. Well, first of all, I would like to really thank Los Angeles Film Forum. I would like to thank Madison and Adam and Jesse for helping us put this together in such a tumultuous year, and especially in this week, which was really intense and a week that I think works in relationship with the films that we're going to show. And it's going to be an interesting conversation afterwards. So thank you, guys. And now I'd also like to thank Travis Wilkerson, which was the architect of so many of this, and which influenced me heavily in my work. And I want to, just to introduce my film. My film is called or titled "How to Forget a Terror Which Became Permanent." It is a film essay that explores the reasoning and motivations inside the regime which authored 1968 Flatlolco Massacre in Mexico City. The film portrays the creation of the foundational fear that defined the relationship between Mexico's civil society and its authoritarian government. The roles of the presidential administration, the media, the international community, and civil society are illustrated by the use of archival footage and on-screen intertitles. So, yep, that's it. Thank you.
Hola, muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí, muchas gracias a LA Film Forum y muchas gracias y a Travis por todo. Estamos la verdad muy emocionados de compartir esto con ustedes y de reunirnos, aunque sea de esta manera. La verdad es que fue Es una gran oportunidad para nosotros y esperamos que disfruten mucho.
Thanks a lot for you, Film Forum, and to Travis. And it means a lot for us to be here to present this, to share this work with you.
And we won't want to talk much about our film. We expect to hear your thoughts about it, and we hope you'll enjoy it. It's called Black Brigades. And just one thing about archival and analog format. We also shot some like a kind of performance in Flatlolco, and it was a way for us to experiment also with film, no, and to shot in film. And for us, it's really important to have this the resource, no. We as experimental filmmakers, we think that we have more control of our material if we shot it on analog film, no? And we propose a dialogue between the archival material and like a new approach to this to Tlatelolco. And we thank you a lot for being here, and we're very excited to share our film with you guys. Sorry. And that's
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hola, we are Andrea and Erik. We are from the second workshop that Travis did in Mexico, and the topic of that workshop was to think about the right of violence and how can we deconstruct, or I don't know how to say it, and deconstruir that right of violence, or if that right of violence really exists and how to deal with it. So we did the movie Fishers, and we hope you will enjoy it. And thank you, Filmforum, Madison, Jesse, Travis. Thank you, everybody.
Buenas noches, hola. Yo soy Aurora Fragoso. Gracias a todos los que hicieron posible que esto se lleve a cabo. Y bueno, mi corto es Matamos los pájaros de un tiro y habla sobre pues esta cotidianidad en la que vivimos sumergidos en una violencia cotidiana que hemos sumergido a partir de nuestras palabras y de discursos de odio desde el poder, y en qué nos convierte eso como individuos y como sociedades. Gracias.
My name is Aurora. My short is called We Kill the Birds with a Single Shot. And it's about this daily violence that we experience. And I thank you for watching it. ¿Es todo? I think I missed something, but more or less.
¿Está bien?
Creo que ya.
Okay. All right. Gracias. Thank you all. I'm going to put the link in the chats here. We've got a program on Vimeo. It's about 87 minutes long. So we'll be back here at, my math is not that good. Is 9:30 still work? Okay. So we'll be back here at 9:30. We'll leave the meeting open, but feel free to go cameras off, but we'll leave the chat open and we'll leave the meeting open, and then we'll reconvene here for a Q&A at 9:30. I hope you enjoy the screening, and thank you again for joining us. Gracias. That I'm really struck by when I watch this program all together is like a sense of the visual archive in a really broad sense. So of course, there's a lot of archival photos utilized, and sometimes seemingly the same images utilized in several of the films. But there's also home movies and Google Street View. So I was just wondering if I could ask about y'all's relationship to the use of the visual archive and what you think its role is in creating space or visibility or consciousness And anyone who would like to can go first. I'll put the question in the chat as well.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, that's for me like a really thoughtful question and something that animates me when I'm working on my stuff. And it began with this project, actually, my relationship with archive. So I've been thinking about it. And I think that, first of all, it is a really useful material for the illustration of political realities. And if you have this, you know, this material that reflects that can provide a context, and you add to that the devices, the methods of montage, of editing, as it's commonly known, well, what you can produce then is a reconstruction of a mutual sense of history. And it is this public history which also enables us to live in a shared reality, in a shared present. And I think that's really unique to this kind of filmmaking. And not only that, I think that it's really urgent, because today we have like a really algorithmic sense of history, which is like tailor-made to our own, you know, consciousness, prejudices, whatever. So I think that working with archive can help us snap out of it.
In our case, well, we did features. What we were trying to do with the archive, we were thinking to make like a body where we're thinking the image and the body itself, and how does it representa. We were trying to think the image, how does it always has to represent something, and we have to, and we would like to dismount this way of thinking the image, and we would like to think the archive of how can we use this material and to rethink it. I don't know if that's the word, like to rethink the image that was made in the past, and how can we use it here in the present.
Sí, para nosotros es muy importante trabajar con archivo, y lo vemos desde el lado de que el archivo mismo es material, y su materialidad como el cuerpo, un cuerpo humano, su corpus, lo que hace es, lo que hacemos, lo que intentamos hacer con archivos es resignificarlo, darle vida. Y esto, darle vida, es montarlo con imágenes que podamos tener en nuestro presente, y hacer un diálogo entre presente y pasado, y entonces hablar una memoria. Y esa memoria que tenga que ser, para nosotros, tiene que ser afectiva, que el cuerpo esté presente, que intervenga, y por eso intervenir también el archivo mismo es intervenir, y es como la analogía, con intervenir el cuerpo en el espacio público. Entonces eso es lo que nosotros estuvimos trabajando un poco en nuestro corto.
Sorry.
Bien, for us, the archive is important, and it's important to think of it as something like a body, a human body, and that for it to be alive, we need to engage with it, we need to intervene with it. And yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, like to, I don't know, like to...
Sí, que hay que resignificar.
Yeah, I mean...
O sea, que tomar el archivo como una materialidad, como un cuerpo vivo, y ese cuerpo vivo hay que resignificarlo. ¿Cómo se resignifica? De alguna forma, análogamente en nuestro trabajo, era el cuerpo, y ese cuerpo, el cuerpo sería el cuerpo que habita los espacios, y la materialidad del archivo se le da nueva vida en un montaje.
So we can give a new life to this by intervening with it, or intervening on it, and by editing it through montage, we can take this material and give it new significance.
Yeah.
And archive material can be manipulated and taken out of context. We think that these film destroy techniques allowed us to appropriate these images and somehow remix the memories to make our own. No? Not in a disrespectful way, but to reframe them, play, and finally heal the memory of this massacre of October the 2nd, and also the memories and the images of violence that we are surrounded, not only in our country, but worldwide. So it's a great responsibility, we think, to be aware of the context. The evidence is there, we can make it visible, but we have to be really aware how we present these images and how can they be understood with the context. And it's for us, the archive right now, we think that information is really polarized, and right now every conspiracy theory can be as valid as any scientific evidence, and any scientific evidence can be labeled as fake news. So we think that we have a great responsibility with our own images and the images we played with in our short film. And finally, we wanted to heal these memories, no? That was like our main goal, we think.
Fue también un modo de dialogar con un pasado que no vivimos directamente, pero que conocemos y que tratamos de, pues, un poco de formar parte de él interviniéndolo y confrontándolo con imágenes presentes.
With a way to enter a dialogue of past, but that we know about and whose images are. ¿Cuál es la última cosa que dijiste?
Contar pues las imágenes del pasado con imágenes del presente y hacerlas dialogar un poco.
Create images of the present and images of the past.
In our case, we used my family archive in Super 8 film, and with the archive of the Filmoteca, and the process was really amazing to have those images in our hands to intervene them and to use all the techniques Travis taught us, like to scratch and bleach or bury. And I think with that, Travis was trying to show us that films can embody that violence. And he was really trying to make us conscious that the way images are shown can contribute to legitimize violence and fear, but we could also gain the opposite by interrogating or questioning the image, and by destroying the film we could achieve that. And he tried to make us really conscious about that, and also to find like a subjective point of view to retell those historical events in a new way, no? To rethink history.
Yo, bueno, un poco regresando a lo que decía al principio cuando presentábamos la película, quiero rescatar el aspecto experimental como punto de partida del cortometraje, porque crea una pieza muy distinta.
Returning to what I said at the beginning, I want to respect the experimental process as the kind of point of departure.
crear efectivamente una pieza muy distinta, porque de algún modo el cine fue capturado por la estructura narrativa. Y aunque nuestro corto es muy narrativo, digamos, el trabajo experimental lo lleva a un lugar distinto.
I think that to a certain extent, cinema was captured by the narrative impulse. And although our short is very narrative, our experimental process takes us in a different direction, or takes us elsewhere.
Porque el mismo proceso experimental abre caminos en lo sonoro y en lo visual, de evocaciones que no podrían, digamos, que no sucederían si fuese un simple trabajo documental.
Because the experimental process takes us both visually and in terms of the soundtrack in directions that would be impossible if this were simply a documentary project. Aurora, ¿estás?
Sí. Pues el archivo fílmico es muy importante porque pues es de donde nos nutrimos, es nuestra memoria, es una memoria colectiva que nos permite entender nuestro presente y generar un gran impacto con nuestros trabajos.
This archive is a collective memory that informs our work, and that it's a shared history. I wanted to ask you guys something about the process, algo sobre el proceso de trabajar con Travis. Eran una serie de clases o de talleres, pero luego ir al archivo. Hay muchas imágenes que vienen de la filmoteca y de películas muy clásicas, ¿no? Del movimiento de 68, ¿no? Del grito y los comunicados del Consejo Nacional de la Huelga. So can you say something about the process of working with Travis and with this archival material? How did you go about creating these works?
Well, the Filmoteca gave us the same film. Like, it was about 5 minutes long, more or less, I think. And the teams had like the same film. And with Travis, we had, it was a week with him, and he showed us material, films, and it was like a theory, the half of the workshop. And the other half was the process itself of the intervention of the film, where he gave us all these techniques, where we could experiment, take the film to our house and experiment by scratching, painting, bleaching, burying, I don't know what else. With, I don't know how to say, baking soda, and a lot of techniques. And after that, we went back to the Filmoteca, and then there we digitalized the film, and all the teams could use the fragments of the other teams, so it was like a collective work.
Por ejemplo, cuando nosotros hervimos en bicarbonato el film, encontramos que habían partes en las que la imagen había desaparecido casi por completo.
So when we put the film in baking soda to boil it, we saw that there were parts where the image completely disappeared.
Y pensamos que de algún modo, o sea, las desapariciones en el material, tenían a esa memoria vacía también de los desaparecidos, y fue uno de los puntos de partida de nuestro trabajo.
And it seemed like that evoked the disappeared, the victims of state violence, and that was for us then, metaphorically, part of our point of departure.
And while we were working with this material, because we had like 3 weeks after the workshop ended to try all these techniques, we were chatting through WhatsApp, and it was really nice to see what other team was doing, and we shared the process. And I think that from the beginning, Travis told us that we should do like a collective film. No, they are personal works, and but at the same time we were always like this community that had this opportunity to play with this material. And in our case, it was very symbolic because
La enterramos.
we buried the film. We thought to have the most shocking images being buried, and for us it was like a ritual. This ritual to bury and try to clean all these memories of violence, and the result for us was really surprising, because the film was turned like a organic piece. I don't know. It became really powerful. We think
Alive.
And yes,
Almost alive.
and it was one in a life opportunity, because as Facundo and Iliana were saying, this material is not that easy to access. It's these archives are also very solemn archives, no? And we lost fear in intervening those images, and the results for each of the groups was really amazing, and we're very thankful for that process. And finally, there was this other part of the workshop in which Mia Hockne, she is a filmmaker and programmer, and she helped us edit, and she also tried to take the best of this of our material. And I spoke a lot, so
No, but I also noticed in your film that the credits acknowledge the Taller Selenium, Daniel Mendoza, and Uriel. So you guys were, they're sort of champions of the analog, artisanal, DIY, hand-processed emulsion in Mexico City, right? Or in Santa Maria la Ribera. So you guys also, the performance piece that you did, you wanted that to be on a emulsion that sort of echoed the emulsion of the late 60s?
Sí, nos gustaba justo ese, como la textura que se creaba, y como confrontarla justo con las imágenes digitales que se ven completamente diferentes, pues, y que se ven actuales completamente. Queríamos que el performance fuera atemporal un poco y que viniera al presente.
We wanted the digital images to sort of confront or contrast with the hand-processed 16 that they shot in 2018 or 2019, and to have this kind of atemporality of, it's a contemporary performance, but it's evoking this technology of the past, or emulsions, the texture of the emulsions of the past.
And the material we used was, how you say, material vencido, outdated negative film. Indeed, we found it in our closet, like from film school. It was like 10 years old, and we think that that gave us this really particular texture of the
color.
film and color. And Selenium helped us with cameras and developing an assessment with that process, no, in shooting this performance.
¿Alguien más?
Yeah, I was, I had a flashback just now of how it came for me, and when I started to make the damage, and it was, like a prayer. I didn't know what to expect out of it. So when we got like the digitized copy and I started watching it, I was amazed by the way that it crystallized the. At least for me, and then I incorporated it in the short film, and I think it works well. But it makes this role of memory, because I just like the same images and then damage images, right? So it connects this idea of the way that memory works of the massacre, and the way that memory it's only focused on the violence and not on the historical factuality of the massacre. So that really came through with this bleached out and decarbonated process, and it was really unique, working with it.
Totalmente, sí, coincido con lo que decís, Gerardo. Siento que también el trabajo de esta materialidad en particular, en el caso de intervenir el material fílmico, nos llevó a un tipo de reflexión también, como rescatando el proceso tanto como grupo, en nuestro caso, como el tipo de material, de algún modo abre o sí crea una apertura distinta al tipo de películas que se hace. A mí me gusta pensarlo como conjunto.
I'm in agreement with what you said, Gerardo. I think there's something about the materiality of the film that then leads us to this process of reflection and brings these elements together.
Y pensándolo también en el modo en el que generalmente aprendemos a hacer películas, si uno empieza por otro lado, también se obtienen distintos resultados. Creo que a veces la idea del autor prima por sobre la idea de la técnica, pero en este caso la técnica siento que fue muy importante para lo que hicimos, por lo menos para mi experiencia.
In my experience, I think the way in which we study filmmaking then leads you to certain types of films, or has an impact on the results. And here the emphasis on the materiality and on the collective process was crucial.
Yeah, I just want to pick a little bit a thought that I got here, because this rings so true for me, and you can see this in every example that you saw tonight on this screening, that the way that we theorize or think the film as a way of expressing, in the end shapes through our techniques, it shapes not only the material, but the way that it's like forcefully expressed, forcefully engaging with history, with a way of making violence not only an spectacle, but to make it to sublimate it into something that brings reflection and a sense of common history.
And one thing that seems like a thread throughout the films is not simply as this historic past, but the way in which it resonates. And I'm guessing that none of you were alive then, and yet it still lives with us. Can you talk something about how, I mean, because we see, these references to Ayotzinapa and Peña Nieto and contemporary Mexican politics, that somehow are these echoes or reverberations of this event from 52 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about those connections between the Flatlolco massacre and the contemporary situation in Mexico?
Sure. I mean, the way, of course, I was not alive in 1968, or maybe my spirit, but the thing is that it's such an iconic moment for Mexico. I think that in many ways it explains or it sets in motion a lot of the dynamics that ended up shaping our country. And the way that it worked was like, quite insidious. The way that this memory, this collective memory that motivates the, the cyclical repetition of state violence, the way that I think that it was shaped, it was through like three main devices. The first of all was the conspirational thinking of the Cold War era, this paranoid Red Scare, and also another element is the imposition of the official version of the events, like saying like the students were armed, they were a threat to the normality of the country, whatever. And also like a third element that shapes this, this understanding is the absence of accountability, the total lack of any sort of accountability from the military, the officials, it makes these three elements made the massacre. It turned it into a memory which does not have like a big understanding of context. So I think that violence without a context, a historical context, becomes a phantasmagoric oppression, right? So it settles people into not being able to respond to these threats, to allow them to feel always threatened. And that fear, that immobilization just gave the regime and all of these, the other expressions like a carte blanche to do whatever on earth they wanted to with any and all of the oppositions that came afterwards. So it kind of set the criterion of how to deal with protesters, with left-wing radicals, and it in turn shaped this civil society which kind of normalized this state of violence, normalized the sense of living in a perpetual state of social decomposition, and this normalization of terror, it is something that we have lived ever since '68, all through the dirty wars, in the '60s and the '70s, and then we come to today, which we have like this never-ending war on drugs, And just to give you a little bit of sense of this, in crescendo dynamic, I wanted to talk just a little bit about how many were killed. In the Tlatelolco protests, we had 5,000 protesters, and official sources that say that everyone for 30 to 300 were murdered, and others, other people calculate in the thousands. So Flatlolco happens, it sets in motion these dynamics, and afterwards, we have, like 3 years later, the Corpus Christi massacre, which has 120 victims, all of them students. And then we continue to the dirty war. The official count there is 1,200 murdered students, activists, and guerrilla groups. So within all of this inertia of unaccountability, conspiracy thinking, normalization of violence, we end up in this context of the drug war. And in the drug war, what we find is just amazing. Every year, 35,000 deaths. This is the count only of 2018 to 2019, all right? And from 2006 to today, we have 250,000 deaths. We're talking about industrial quantities of murder and violence, which you could perfectly trace to the early responses to the 1968 massacre. So, and not to talk about the feminicides, which is another horror story of 2,240 women killed, and gender violence. And this is only in the first 7 months of this year. So, I mean, I don't know if you could reduce all of this violence and the response to it to this original point in 1968, but it surely does mark it is a landmark that set in motion a lot of the dynamics that lets these horrible people get away with it. Yeah, that's where we are.
Aurora, your short also makes this, I mean, it seems like it speaks to this kind of contemporary violence, not just, no solamente violencia del Estado, sino también una sociedad en que hay violencia por todos lados, ¿no?
Sí, en este trabajo lo que busqué explorar es eso desde lo más básico, el lenguaje día a día.
The day-to-day violence on the most basic level.
Y que va desde la calle y pues sí, que va del discurso de odio de políticos y que permea las calles.
The way in which the discourse of hate of politicians permeates the street.
Y bueno, parte de las escenas justo fue The Women's March de 2017. Y bueno, justo es un momento importante que cruza el presente. Adiós, Trump.
And she wanted to use imagery from the 2016 Women's March that touches on today and or yesterday, and the end of the current presidency in the United States. ¿Otra cosa más? Oh.
Pues sí, justo eso, cómo el archivo y nuestra historia y la memoria nos lleva al presente y se repite, lamentablemente, justo es como este recuerdo que no hay que olvidar, y el archivo fílmico nos sirve para simbrar eso.
The way in which the past repeats itself and informs the present, and the way in which the Filmic Archive reminds us of this and siembra or functions as a reminder. Does anyone else want to speak to this connection between 68 and contemporary Mexican political situation?
Yo quería platicar, bueno, yo soy argentino de origen y
Por el acento.
sí, y llevo 16 años en México viviendo.
He says that he's Argentine, but he's been living in Mexico for 16 years.
Entonces, digamos, las comparaciones entre ambos países para mí siempre fueron frecuentes.
There are frequent opportunities for creating a comparison between the two countries and two histories, two national histories.
Siempre me pregunté por qué en México no existían movimientos políticos que en Argentina se definen como de base. Me refiero a movimientos políticos que se identifican en cada una de las regiones y pertenecen a grupos sociales.
And I've always asked myself, why isn't that in Mexico you have the equivalent of what in Argentina you call base or movements from the base, which is to say locally organized socio-political movements.
En México los movimientos políticos tienen que ser muy grandes para adquirir representación. Me refiero, por ejemplo, a un movimiento disidente como fue los zapatistas, es un movimiento muy grande, y el resto de los movimientos ciudadanos que existen son partidos políticos.
That in Mexico, for a political movement to gain any kind of recognition, it has to be massive, it has to be huge. So something like the Zapatistas, or aquí voy a meter mi cuchara, llenar el Zócalo con un millón de gente, no? You know, for a political movement to fill the public square in downtown in front of the Capitol, in front of the National Palace, that's 1 million people. And the other political movements are political parties that have other commitments or obligations or are entangled in a system.
Exactamente. Pero cada vez creo que, digamos, estoy más convencido de que el motivo por el cual no suceden, digamos, este tipo de movimientos sociales o democracias regionales es porque los poderes fácticos, y cuando me refiero a los poderes fácticos, me refiero a tanto a la delincuencia como al Estado, digamos, delincuencia entre comillas, la delincuencia o, digamos, en este sentido, el crimen organizado es un poder fáctico que actúa muchas veces en beneficio de un interés político. Estos poderes fácticos actúan de modo tal de que eliminan cualquier tipo de discusión política y de posibilidad de que se cree un movimiento autónomo.
Okay, now we're getting deep into it. It has to do with the relationship between other types of, in this case, criminal organizations and politics, right? Suponemos que en los 60, 70, 80 sí habían carteles de exportación de droga, pero no sin la guerra contra el narco, pues hubo algún arreglo que no entendemos bien entre priistas y narcos, ¿no?
Es así. Sí, o sea, de México, desde la Guerra Sucia, pero probablemente desde antes, utiliza el mismo sistema donde los poderes fácticos actúan políticamente en las regiones para que solamente se exprese aquello que es políticamente conveniente al poder, y ese poder está en consonancia entre, digamos, el poder criminal y el poder político de turno.
These other regional actors, which are not political parties, but rather organized or organized crime exporters or producers of narcotics, have or had reached a certain understanding with political powers and perhaps usurped the ability of other social actors in organizing other kind of community-based or locally rooted political movements?
For that, the power facts, violence is a tradition in Mexico. Is part of the landscape. Esto es el modo en que yo conecto el 68 con lo que está pasando actualmente. No están separados ideológicamente.
And ideologically, this suggests these connections between what happened in 68 and what's happening now in Mexico.
I just wanted to see if there's any questions from anybody else in attendance, or if you have any other questions for one another.
Okay, I just want to pick up a little bit where Facundo left off, because that was just, as always, a perfect exposition of our tortuous reality. And I want to add a little bit to it. I want to talk a little bit about the relationship of the state apparatus and the criminals, right? And to trace everything together, because as I said before, we don't have a historical factuality of this violence, this traditional violence, as Facundo perfectly coined this reality. And instead of this factuality, we have this memory, which again focuses only on the terror and not on all of the moving pieces and all of the sets of circumstances that produces it. So it disengages people, right? And the reflection of, or at least what I was trying to say with my film, or one of the things that I wanted to say with my film, was about a way of killing memories and killing this sense of tradition with historical factuality. So that's the ambition. That's a thought that came from Plato. The philosopher, he thought that writing down things kills memories in favor of a sense of history. So I think that we need to engage in those terms, and I also think that by doing so, we will reinterpret the casualty, you know, the reasons why this occurs, and not place it in the victims, but instead to locate it with concrete knowledge that the responsibility of this terror comes from the state, and having this state apparatus, this military, which is totally unaccountable for years and decades, to this day, to this very day, to just 2 weeks ago, the Lieutenant General Secretary of National Defense, this is like the highest echelon of the military. There's no other position higher than this. And this is the man in charge of the violence in the drug war from the state. General Salvador Cienfuegos, the General Salvador Cienfuegos, he was arrested in Los Angeles, actually. And he was arrested for drug trafficking and money laundering. We're talking about like the toughest of the toughest in this military hierarchy. And why do we have this? We have this because we have a long tradition of unaccountability. So a way to engage with that is to produce and watch and you know and share this conversation, to have a shared sense of history, and by that I mean a shared reality which makes unacceptable this state of degradation and violence.
Yeah, and one of the films, I forget exactly which one it was, but referenced the Elena Poniatowska, you know, La Noche de Flatlolco, which, you know, again, it doesn't pretend to be this definitive history of what happened or what led up to the massacre of the 2nd of October, but rather, it's these eyewitness accounts. It's this sort of oral history of, this is what I saw, this is what I saw, this is what this other person saw. And you get this kind of collective or mosaic, kaleidoscopic vision of the event.
And we tried just that to see other angles of society, not just like the people who were active in the protests, but we made interviews to members of my family that were like near, but in an indirect way to the movement. And we came up with stories that reconstruct that moment, no? So it was interesting to unite my family history with the country's history, no? Or this event.
Madison, you had a sort of meta question, right?
I'll zoom in. Instead of going so big, I'll actually ask something a little easier to answer late in the conversation, I hope. But we've talked a lot about the archive and visuality and theory and history, but I also wanted to address sound is such a huge component of all these works, it seems to me, including Gerardo's film. But I thought I might start with Erik and Andrea or anybody else who would like to speak to it. But I was wondering if you could talk about the way that you use sound in your work to articulate these ideas, and especially music, if you use that. And again, I would also consider Gerardo's use of sound musical, according to my definition. But maybe Andrea, if you'd like to go first.
Well, we thought about the sound from the beginning. We were thinking to make an image from the sound, and because we also like to, or we enjoy to hear music, we asked some friends if they can collaborate with us and make us like some music. So we asked a girl, Gura, from this group Mo, and I also asked to my brother-in-law Gerald Cleaver if I can use one of his songs, and they were like super excited about the project, so they also wanted to collaborate with us. And Gerald also told us, yes, you can take whatever you want from my archive, and so that's what we did. And the way we choose the music or the sound, it was thinking in how the sound could make an image and how can also talk with the image and with the and with all these quotes that we put in the short film. I don't know if you no sé si yes. So that's how we work with the sound.
Anyone else?
And we also work with an actress, the Fernanda Echevarria, is the protagonist in some kind of way, and her voice was making a dialogue with images, but also making like this satire or this ironic counterpoint with the images. So we think that help us to make the images less solemn and more playful. And the great thing is that she's a great actress, so she immediately found this tone.
es una parte muy, muy importante, justo porque, bueno, a mí me daba risa que en las salas donde se proyectaba, la gente se reía, entonces se logró este juego entre, pues sí, esta violencia y este drama, pero con el sonido se logró esta reflexión que es tan cruda que, bueno, a veces llega la risa. Y lo principal pues eran frases, justo, estas palabras que normalizamos pero tienen un grado alto de violencia. Y bueno, cierra con una música que como que encierra todo el concepto.
For me, the sound was a very important part. And when the film was projected in the theater, people were laughing. And that for me was some indication of the success, where I was able to do these manipulations of sound, and through the use of the music, where it exposes this normalization of violence that's been integrated into our everyday speech. Más o menos.
En nuestro caso, nosotros nos pasó algo parecido, que, bueno, a lo que decía Erik y Andrea, que habían trabajado un poco en base al sonido. Nosotros también un poco elaboramos nuestro guión en base al sonido. Digamos, el relato sucedía a través de unas cartas que de hecho existieron.
We thought about our soundtrack in relationship to, or rather the sound in relationship to our soundtrack. And there were these cartas, letters that existed, that we integrated into the soundtrack.
Sí, pero sí, finalmente me parece muy interesante que el sonido sea como mucho más el guión, en su principio, mucho más la estructura. Y de repente me sorprenden trabajos como el de Gerardo, que justo ese silencio pasa por lo visual, ¿no? O sea, si vemos el terror, yo no me acuerdo el nombre completo de la de Gerardo, pero es como que es un poco lo opuesto a la nuestra.
For us, the sound was really the basis for the script, and it strikes me the contrast with Gerardo's work, where there was this silence that's kind of it's completely the opposite. It's sort of this representation of the horror, a reflection of the horror.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think that both Facundo's and Iliana's short and mine have a dialectical relationship, which is very interesting. And I was thinking about how this idea of putting in titles came to be, and it was like an inertia. It at first it felt like effective in a pedagogic sense, like to solemnly communicate the themes through the cold authority of the intertitles. I liked it, and but as I kept developing it, I found that this decision came from a posture that I have myself with the violence, with the terror, and it is a posture in which I feel that me as a person, as me, that I can't like, or at least in the sense that I wanted to communicate the things that I did, that I couldn't like articulate with my voice. It felt wrong. So that sense of like being misplaced with this, it turned into more, instead of me talking, me demonstrating, to show, not to tell, even if it's plagued with commentary with the intertitles. It has like this this era of historical consequentiality, which could only be done with that remove, you know, and I feel that that absence gives the expression through the editing is aggressiveness, which I'm very fond of, and I think that's the way that I was trying to engage with a sense of historical realism, and it is an attempt of historical realism which is overcome by emotion to the point that the film itself, you know, explodes, and along with all the horrible people with it.
No sé si hay algunas últimas palabras para concluir. Does anybody have any, you know, closing thoughts or last things that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I just want to say something. Congratulations on removing Trump from office. Bravo. We're all very happy. And I think that America and also Mexico are today in a process of healing, you know, all of the terrors that we have been speaking about. And I think that there is no healing without accountability. So we must engage in this, our recent history, our histories that gives us this structure of torment for so many people. And we must look out for ways that we can pressure the people in charge to hold these violent actors accountable, not only here in Mexico, also in the United States, also with the way that the police is working against its own people. It is very important to also recognize that the situation at the border is in a situation right now, and that there are no compromises or no way to deal with it without holding ICE, without holding the border patrol, without holding the people that run the camps accountable. Accountability is the only way that we are going to be able to heal our nations, and in so doing, we will be able to build a dignified future for all of us. And finally, I just want to thank especially Travis Wilkerson for giving us so much of his wisdom and thoughts about how to engage not only with our work, but with our way we understand our lives. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for making this possible. Thank you very much. I love you.
Well, I think both the United States and Mexico have a lot of, you know, healing and soul searching ahead of them to move forward. I think it would be nice if El Peje gave Joe Biden a call and congratulated him, but we're waiting for that. ¿Alguien más quiere decir unas últimas palabras para concluir?
I would just like to thank again all of you and Los Angeles Film Forum for opening these spaces to show our films, and like for creating a space where we can talk about these things, and that I believe social change comes from working together. And in this dialogue, I think we can rethink history and truly make a change, maybe in a small context, but in showing this film, we can also like move forward and create or make another future, or imagine another possible future.
Y a las instituciones y personas que organizaron esto, ¿no? Como Travis o como la Filmoteca o como la cátedra de la UNAM, o sea, las personas que organizaron esto realmente dan la posibilidad de que este tipo de reflexiones sucedan y suceden sobre algo real, que son estas películas. Creo que es muy importante entender que esos espacios colectivos necesitan existir para que existan estas películas también.
That the institutions that supported this project created a space of reflection that's really important for us to be able to use to think back on this past and on the material, the filmic material itself.
Well, we also want to thank you, Madison and Jesse, Filmforum, Travis, and I don't know, we have to keep talking and to keep making some dialogue between all of us. I mean, not between each country. I mean, it would be great to make a dialogue in the whole world and to keep thinking and to make something better for all of us. And thank you for this opportunity. And
igual, solo queda decir lo que todos vamos a decir, que agradecidos con estos espacios para reflexionar juntos y ojalá nos encontremos físicamente pronto, todos, y nos demos un abrazo. Creo que eso sería genial.
Thanks for providing this space, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in physical, physically, not just on the screen, in the near future. No, gracias.
Bueno, ahora en español. Y por último, bueno, sí agradecerles a ustedes, Jesse, Madison, Adam, Travis, Cátedra Bergman, UNAM, o sea, todos. Eso es algo bien padre de crear esta comunidad y que hayamos juntado estos dos grupos y que sigamos teniendo estos diálogos tan enriquecedores, ¿no? De verdad, les agradecemos mucho.
Many thanks. Hopefully, come together and continue this dialogue, which has been so rich.
And finally, we're like a final thought right now that we are via Zoom. Maybe it's the post-pandemic cinema maybe can give us a little hope, because right now is the time to change the means of production, of film production, and to try to stop all these big enterprises. No, I think we have like this great battle ahead of us, no, trying to survive in the film industry. So this kind of work and this kind of places in which we can share our work right now is very valuable. And thank you again.
Muchas gracias por el espacio. Es muy, muy, muy enriquecedor ver todos los trabajos juntos y dialogando. Gracias.
Thank you, and it was very enriching to see all the works together, to have the space to converse. Pues gracias a ustedes por su trabajo y pues espero que nos vemos pronto.
Many thanks to you guys, and descansen, buenas noches, stay safe, stay healthy, bye.
You too.
Gracias.
Gracias para todo. Thank you all.
Para todo.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really nice.
Evening. Sleep well. Be safe. And thank you all for coming.